Good evening and welcome to the Late Late Show with Kathryn Taylor. And I'm welcoming tonight as well Zoe Neagle.
This is Teachers Talk Radio and you are listening live.
My guest tonight is Zoe Neagle, a fabulous assistant head teacher from North London. We're going to be speaking about all things ECT and about how to support teachers at all stages of their careers. So welcome to Zoe.
This is Teachers Talk Radio and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome to the Late Late Show. My name is Kathryn Taylor and I'm speaking to you here from Buckinghamshire in the UK. On today's show, I'll be talking to Zoe Neagle. I'll be talking to Zoe about a number of things, including her experiences of supporting beginning and early career teachers and, in fact, teachers at many stages of their career. And remember, if you are listening in live and would like to join us, either to post a question in the chat or for Zoe to answer, or if you want to call in and speak to us, then please download the Podbean app and visit ttradio.org and click Listen Live on the homepage. This should take you directly to the show. There you can post comments and ask questions during our conversation. Once I've spoken to Zoe, I'll open up to any of you who want to call in. But before I introduce Zoe, I'm just going to play the news.
It's time for a fresh start to language learning. Pearson EdXL's new student-centred French, German and Spanish 2024 GCSEs cater to the needs of all learners, regardless of their background, ability or reason for studying. Rooted in learned language knowledge, their assessments are transparent and accessible, allowing all students to showcase their language skills. Through inclusive and relatable content, the new Pearson EdXL MFL GCSEs build a shared cultural capital that helps students develop an understanding of and appreciation for the wider world. Find out more at go.pearson.com/MFL GCSE 24.
This programme has been brought to you by the Happy Confident Company. Our clinically approved, ready-to-go wellbeing and mental health programme will help your pupils thrive. In only 10 minutes a day, you'll be able to deliver social and emotional learning and wellbeing tools throughout your school. To find out more, visit us at www.happyconfident.com.
This is Teachers Talk Radio and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
The BBC reports that 1 in 3 primary schools has no male teachers. The study by the Warwick Business School says the proportion of schools without a male classroom teacher has increased in the last 12 months. The report's author, Dr. Joshua Fullard, said this lack of male teachers was bad for pupils. Dr. Fullard is Assistant Professor of Behavioural Science at Warwick Business School. He went on to say that there is a large body of research that shows students benefit from being educated by a teacher with certain similarities to them. The report also found that schools in special measures are less likely to have a male classroom teacher. In total, the report found that 24.3% of all state schools in England had no male classroom teachers. The report called for teachers' pay to be raised by more than 10% and for a merit-based reduction in tuition fees for university-led teacher training to be introduced. Julie McCulloch, Director of Policy for ASCL Union, said more needed to be done to attract men and women alike, and a spokesperson for the DfE said the department wanted the profession to be inclusive. North East Child Poverty Commission website reports that new figures published by the DfE confirm that more than 3 in 10 pupils across the North East are now registered for free school meals. This is an increase from January 2022. It remains the highest proportion of any part of England. The figure of 30.4% is compared with 18.8% of pupils in the South East and 19.4% in the East of England. The England-wide rate is 23.8%. All regions have seen a significant increase in the number and share of children eligible for free school meals over the last 7 years. The Guardian reports children's enjoyment of writing has fallen to crisis point, following research completed by the National Literacy Trust. The charity says an alarmingly low level of children and young people enjoy writing. The research was conducted across the UK. 34.6% of young people aged 8 to 18 said that they enjoy writing in their free time. Although 3 in 4 children starting school said that they enjoyed writing, this dropped to 1 in 4 by the age of 16. The Children's and Young People's Writing Report is drawn from over 70,000 responses from children to the charity's annual literacy survey. The number of children who say they enjoy writing in their free time has dropped by 12.2% in the 13 years since the survey began. Young people do report that they write to improve mental health and well-being and to support causes or issues they care about. Full details can be found on the National Literacy Trust website. Finally, Microsoft News reports that Taiwan has made the move to use generative artificial intelligence, or AI, to help students learn English. Teachers in the country often report that students read and write better than they speak English, as shyness and a lack of practice can hinder oral communication. A new chatbot has been funded by Taiwan's Ministry of Education to help pupils get the practice they need. The Coolie bot allows pupils to speak person to AI and build up conversation on preset topics. It also assesses punctuation, accuracy, and fluency. Taiwan has set a goal of becoming bilingual in Chinese and English by 2030. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
This is 2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello, this week I'm going to ask you a question. Do you use presentation software to help you deliver your lessons? 99% of you will be saying yes at this point. Have you ever considered how many presentations the average pupil in your school sees in a day, in a week, or even in their entire school life? Considering a typical secondary education, with a bit of rough maths, over a week with 5 lessons a day, there's potential to see 25 presentations. That's 100 presentations in just 4 weeks. I've left out any additional presentations like assemblies and visitors, etc. Working on a 38-week year, that's a whopping 950 presentations a year. That's a lot of presentations. Now, let's throw in some schools have a standardised slide theme and set layouts. Now we have 950 exactly the same lesson beginnings. I'm not saying this is a bad thing, but do we really know what experience a pupil gets through a typical week in school? Are they being engaged, or are they being presented with the same visual stimulus day in, day out, simply causing them to fly below the radar? If you're like me, you're now thinking, how do I make my presentation stand out? Is there a presentation software out there that's better than all the rest? In my humble opinion, this is like the visualizer versus HD webcam argument. What works for some does not work for others because all subjects are not the same, which is a good thing, don't get me wrong, but please bear in mind that what works for one teacher may not work for another. A search for free presentation software returns no less than 24 apps I recognise. Some are interactive like Mentimeter, others have more dynamic transitions like Prezi. Most also have additional features and add-ons you can purchase. I know what you're saying, come on Steve, which is the best though? Well, the answer is simple, but I've run out of time, so I'll have to tell you next week. In the meantime, please consider the number of presentations a typical pupil is subjected to in your school. Does this need to change, or does it work? And how do you know? Do you have a preferred presentation software, and what are the features that make it stand out for you? Let us know at TT Radio Official. I'm Steve Woods, and that was 2 Minute Tech.
2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Well, welcome back. This is the Late Late Show with Kathryn Taylor and my special guest tonight, Zoe Neagle. And if you want to ring in or ask us a question, you can pop it in the chat, or if you want to download the Podbean app, then you can do so, and then you can call in by pressing the icon at the top of the screen on your phone's app and click, and I'll connect you. So I'll be talking to Zoe about all things ECT and ITT, which is a bit of alphabet soup. That came up in my tutor time this week, actually. I had a child who was absolutely convinced that alphabet soup was alphabeti spaghetti, and we had to Google it. So we're going to try and avoid the acronyms. So, Zoe, welcome. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your typical day and your role surrounding teacher training and ITTs and ECTs?
Yes, of course. Firstly, thank you for having me on. It's a great pleasure to talk about the passion for teaching and working in schools. A typical day in my current position as assistant head overseeing teaching and learning, it's a crazy day. It's a day that I love with, there's lots and lots of variety. I work in a very busy school. It's a through school at the moment, so primary, secondary and sixth form, with a range of students coming through the door all of the time. I've got a fabulous set of lessons that I have the pleasure of teaching, both in English and drama, but I also have the wonderful experience of going around and working with a lot of fabulous colleagues. A lot of those tend to be ECT, so early career teachers, as well as working with more experienced staff in terms of how we can formulate the best possible learning opportunities for all of our students.
Excellent. And so, when you've come to this role, you've talked about supporting the early career teachers. What kind of things do you kind of go through with them? What's their kind of curriculum?
Well, I think it's really important that they get a rich diet of lots of different and varied experiences. Firstly, the early careers framework has changed quite recently from what used to be called, the NQT years. So early careers teacher training, and you would do your initial teacher training, and then you'd have one NQT year, but now it's turned to 2 years, and I think that's really positive because it gives a lot more opportunity for the teachers to reflect and to really embed their practice. So I think what's lovely is that there's a triangulation with the teacher trainee themselves, and then with the providing bodies, with lots of different theory and research that kind of feed into their practice, and then they have an opportunity alongside a mentor to work really hard to embed that in their practice and kind of make sure that the classroom strategies that they're using and the ideology behind what they're doing is really effective in order for the students to make progress. And I think those relationships there are something that's really tangible, and when it works well, leads to real success in the classroom.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting. I work with ECTs as well in my role, and what I really like is sort of that fresh-faced eagerness that you get with some people. And I know that we both follow the early career framework, and last week I was delivering a session to some ECTs in year one, and they were doing all this stuff about their professional responsibilities and their what they think makes them a professional teacher and that kind of thing. And it's just so lovely sort of having those conversations, because you and I know that we've all met cynical teachers, haven't we? We've all met, and occasionally probably been those cynical teachers in some respects. So, how do you kind of go about trying to keep them buoyed up and not kind of ground down by what is ultimately a really dynamic and quite stressful environment, and so much multitasking going on? So how do you keep them buoyed up?
Okay, I think it's really important to consider them and to help them along the way to view this not as a job but as a profession. And we all know that it's the vocation in terms of going into teaching, the desire to go into schools. is something that is innate, and people jump from various careers to do, or they come fresh from university. And I think it's important that we enable them to keep their minds open and think of it as a profession, not a job, because once we have that insular view where it's just about that one place or that one classroom or that one department, I think that becomes a difficult place for them to avoid burnout. And there's lots of variety in different schools, and I think one of the ways I would buoy them up is to inspire them about what's out there and to continue that professional development, and the understanding that as professionals we're never the finished article, and we're continually evolving. And so even when I think there's a false kind of economy that teachers just think, right, well, you give them a lesson plan and then they do it and then that's it, they're a teacher and they're done. And I think the danger of that is as we all know, one lesson plan won't work for one class, it won't work for another person. There's an element of autonomy with everybody, and I think it's that eagerness to be able to discipline oneself, to constantly look and strive and become supported by the different researchers, inspired by so many wonderful educationists that are out there, and know that you're on a journey. And so I think, yes, to avoid cynicism, but know that is part and parcel of a very busy lifestyle as a teacher, but absolutely not being defined by one of the placements that you might be in or the school that you tend to do your ECT in. Saying that, there's some wonderful schools out there that manage to inspire and hold on to their teacher trainees, and they have long and very wonderful careers in those schools. But I think that's one of the main strings to my bow, is to ensure that we think that this is a long-term goal, we're evolving, and that you ultimately get to develop yourself in any way you see fit, to keep yourself contented and to keep yourself up to date as a professional, and understand that the profession is moving in different directions as opposed to stagnating. As with the young people that we are trying to inspire ourselves, we need to adjust our style, the things that we do, the way that we look, the curriculum that we teach alongside them. So I think it's a very liberating view when you have that outlook, as opposed to just thinking that you have to do what it says on a PowerPoint or do what it says from a lesson plan. And I think that can become frustrating for people, certainly creative thinkers, as many teachers are, and that we love the autonomy, but also ensuring that autonomy is kind of developed in the appropriate way.
It's so interesting. I mean, I can get tremendously boring about my views on professionalism, so if it's going that way, just intervene. But I'm absolutely fascinated by the kind of what the question of what teacher professionalism is, and this idea that we have like a system which is quite a managerial, technicalized system, which does kind of want to push us towards this really efficient way of teaching, which is perhaps linked to really standardized PowerPoints or lesson plans or particular ways of doing things. And, that can lead to like the churn and burn of getting people in, and then they only last 5 years and all the rest of it. So that kind of really narrowed down autonomy, that's kind of our system that we're all within. But at the same time, there's other competing kind of ways of looking at professionalism. So you might have a very traditional view of, and there probably will be people in your school that have a really traditional view of professionalism, and they might be very keen on sort of their experience and how much they've learned, and it's not nothing, of course. Experience is a really wonderful thing, but I tend to kind of worry a bit about teachers who think that their professionalism is only based on experience. And I think the really important point you made was about being up to date and research engaged and kind of ready to change your practice and ready to adapt your practice. And that's a mindset, I think, you know.
Yeah, I think obviously we have to quality assure the standard of the teachers that we're training, and so therefore there is some judgments that are placed against the teaching standards. However, I think what's really important is we upskill mentors and we upskill departments and we upskill people that are overseeing in terms of this coaching mentality. And the coaching allows people to be very self-reflective and to question why they might be doing things. So therefore, and if, as long as they're well informed, like you say, if they're well informed by reading the latest things or following certain people, educators on Twitter, or looking into different literature, and if there's there's never just one way of doing these things. Likewise, there's never one way of making sure the learner learns. There's a whole variety thing that encompasses it. And as you say, us as professionals need to be open to the fact that we can be multifaceted in the different techniques that we try. And I think, experience can give a lot to a trainee teacher, but not specifically everything. And I think there is a danger with just experience is kind of reiterating and churning out the same thing all of the time without that fresh view, without that reflection and saying, well, is it working? Is it right for my context? Is it right for my time? Is it right for my learners? Because our learners change, and the needs of our learners change all of the time, and likewise us as individuals change, and the times that we're in change. And I think there's lots of things that we need to do in order to protect our trainee teachers. We all know that teacher recruitment is in a horrendous state, and however, those of us that have been doing it and know that what a rich and fulfilling job it can be, and it is a wonderful job, and we're always waiting to get that kind of sweet spot with those students, and we're in it for the students. But saying that, we also really appreciate that there's lots of time and effort, and nobody can really appreciate just how consuming a job it can be. And certainly, everybody chuckles when they know a teacher at the that old adage, oh, you only work 9 till 3 and you get 13 weeks holiday. I mean, all of us chuckle at that, because if you ever knew anything, that is certainly not a true reflection of the profession.
I read somewhere that I was earning £76,000 a year and leaving it. I was like, I'd love to go where I go and what I spend it on, because it was news to me.
Absolutely. And I think what we really need to do is not just have the glib TV adverts that show doing wonderful things suddenly, or I think what we need to do is make some real decisions on a national level on how we're going to attract more people to the profession, because we need to have a whole range of our society. Our school students need to have teachers, albeit training or having taught or coming from industry, of a range of genders, range of background. We need a whole multicultural element, and so therefore our teacher, the teaching profession is inclusive of everybody, and so therefore the students that we're teaching get to reflect the reality of their life to them. And I think to do that, we need to really make sure that the quality of teacher training is empowering, and so therefore it isn't just a job that you can do while your kids are young, or it's not just a job that you can do as an interim until you get a proper job. And I was on a conference this Saturday, actually, a professional conference that was very inspiring. There was a whole range of teacher talks. A number of them made reference to the fact that they were going to do teaching until they got a proper job, and we all kind of laughed. The auditorium laughed, because we fully understand that actually some of the opinions that other people have about our profession, are kind of rooted in this misunderstanding. And I think the understanding needs to be really clear in terms of what it is that we're doing and how we do it to make that difference. And I think, going back to your former question, I think that triangulation between ensuring that we have good quality providers for our teacher training. So, and we're allowing them to make mistakes, and we're allowing them to be in a safe environment where they're supported. So, you know, I have a huge range of ECTs in the school that I'm working at, and I think support is crucial, and being able to upskill them and to develop this toolkit of them, and, you know, that hunger and verve to want to learn more and to be able to go out and try new things, but also learn from the experienced ones by sharing that good practice, experiencing that good practice, and knowing that you can get those success moments with a class, because that's what kind of leads us, not the data drives, not all of the kind of writing another email and dealing with all of those. It's those classroom experiences.
I do love a spreadsheet, though.
I think that's really, I mean, yeah, really, they've got their place.
No, I think you're right. I mean, I guess it's so interesting. I was going to talk to you about that conference that we went to, actually, because you took quite a number of your ECTs with you, didn't you?
Yes.
And how did they respond to those kind of talks with those experienced practitioners that were going on?
Well, you know, I think firstly we have to be appreciative that it was on a Saturday, and so therefore there was an element of bribery in terms of a free pub grub and some free time. But I think that's the important part, is to appreciate, like in the outside world, as it were, if you were doing overtime, you'd get something back. And I think, again, this kind of false mentality that you give blood, sweat, tears, and you kind of, you know, throw your soul at this job until you can't do it anymore, is something that we've got to stop. So I think, firstly, with the promise of some time back, and the promise, and I've got a wonderfully supportive head, and the promise of some free pub grub, there was a number of them, it was 11 in fact, that signed up for that Saturday, and we had a wonderful day, and there was very, very positive comments. They were inspired. The fact that they got to choose all the different speeches that they went to, and so therefore they were able to kind of manipulate their journey, or that academic journey, the way that they wanted. And it was being very much done with rather than done to. So they had the autonomy to choose what speakers or topics they were interested in, and therefore evoke some really interesting questions. And again, it's about that professional conversation. And it was a pleasure to be within a very nice school grounds on this occasion, whereby you were with fellow friends, fellow colleagues, fellow professionals, that we were really talking about the nitty gritty. And it wasn't just about what we're going to do with our next policy, or what we're going to do. It was a really meaningful, engaging debate, and really inspiring by a lot of people. And so therefore, and what was lovely for me was on Monday morning at briefing to overhear conversations whereby people were asking about it, and they were talking so positively and asking when the next one was, and saying it was really good, and questions like, it really made me think about. And so therefore, I think what's really interesting is those boundaries blur. So in terms of as being a teacher trainer, what's important is that we need to remember that we are learners, and we continue that learning alongside the students. And if we can, whatever our subject choices and whatever kind of key stage we're teaching, and whether it's primary or even, but that love for learning and identifying us as human beings learning, whatever our age, I think is something that is, you know, it is truly wonderful, actually, without sounding glib.
Well, it's not glib, though, because it is supported by the evidence. There is research evidence that tells us that, you know, a good CPD, a good diet of good CPD, and I know that there can be some really not very good CPD, but a good diet of good CPD actually does kind of buffer you a bit from the symptoms of burnout. And, you know, I mean, I can speak to this personally, because I definitely have been at a point where I've been very close to walking away. And, you know, I'm doing my doctorate, I've taken that on, and of course you will imagine that is an awful lot of work. And people sort of say, how do you do it? Well, actually, I feel so much better now that I'm doing that, because I'm so interested in what I'm doing. It makes it so much more engaging for me. Whereas before I was just tired, and probably slightly bored and slightly underemployed, and that is not a healthy place to be. Whereas if you throw yourself into, okay, I'm interested in, well, for me it's sort of professional development as a general topic, but you might be interested in anything, physics for girls, or
well, my what sparked my interest originally is that I originally came to teaching via teaching in prisons and young offenders, and being in contact very closely with people that have become disaffected with the education system. And so it made me question quite thoroughly about how could there be a difference in order to stop these young people becoming on this path. And so therefore I decided to do a bit more research, and then I went to the Institute of Education and did my PGCE, and working in inner London schools, and found it is very much about it's very much about the department that you were placed in back then, and who and how you were able to kind of manage those classes. And I think what's happened very recently, or in latter years, because I've been teaching for 23 years, is there's been far more support and investment in the theoretical knowledge, as well as the emotional support of the teacher trainers, rather than just kind of throw you in and sink or swim kind of mentality. And I think that's what led me to do my master's in education, again, was to kind of look for that real deep knowledge, and alongside the philosophy, in terms of what do we know, how can it help, and how do we implement it, and more importantly, how do we share that knowledge. And I think I was really lucky to work in some really fantastic departments, whereby rather than everybody just doing their own thing and working in a bespoke way, we really were kind of together and working as a wonderful team, and supported each other and laughed and cried with all of the difficulties that presents themselves when you're trying to teach in a very difficult school. But it actually made the journey much more favourable. And I think we need to have a very big dollop of real life when we go in there as well, because when we're reading some of these texts about how to do it right in the sweet spot, and that there's this kind of utopia about our practice will come beautiful every day, and that's not the reality.
And it's a blame game as well, though, because there certainly has been I'm reading the book at the moment, Tyranny of Merit, and this sort of this virtue about it. So somehow, if it's not going right, it must be because you're not working hard enough. And we internalize that, whether it's intentional or not. And I don't think it's always been intentional. I think there have been some messages that have come out via sort of
absolutely
our Mr. Gove over the years, back in between 2010 and 2019, when we had that really horrible framework.
My lord, that has caused scars that I'm not sure.
Has, progress in 20 minutes.
Absolutely.
It's too quiet, too still, too noisy, too what you couldn't get it right.
Well, I think absolutely. I think you're right. There's been so many mistakes in that, within the title of education historically. And I think this evolution that's coming through much more publicly now about listening to the people's voice, listening to teacher voice, listening to student voice, listening to, our unions, and even Mr. Ofsted themselves listening to and kind of moving forward on the back of what's actually happening in schools, what's actually happening with head teachers, what's actually happening with staff. It doesn't matter how good the training is, it doesn't matter how good the school is or how needy the students are. If you haven't got teachers in front of those young learners, then it doesn't matter how good the systems are, it's not going to work. But clearly, if we can't recruit them and retain those teachers, then something is wrong in the system. And so we are being asked for them to be doing unnecessarily difficult tasks that's unmanageable and cannot be sustainable in the way that people expect it to be in other professions. And I think one of the things I notice with young people, and I have the pleasure of working with lots of 20-odd-year-olds, is that their own peers, they talk to their peers, and their peers, if they choose not to go into education, there isn't an expectation of them to be working weekends and evenings and constantly, and they do tend to have lots more money, and they can afford. Unfortunately, I am working in a situation with wonderful ECTs, but they are having to take a second job alongside teacher training in order just to cover their cost of living in London, but wherever. But that's madness. That's absolute madness. So in terms of the quality is there, but sometimes we do need to start questioning how can we look after our people. We're living in amongst a mental health crisis post-COVID, and therefore some of the stresses that we're putting onto our young professionals are unmanageable, unmanageable, because in order, we all know that we need to manage their capacity, we need to have that work-life balance, and those are people that have been teaching briefly or long-term. The work-life balance is something that becomes a bit laughable when you're in the midst of a full-on teaching timetable. But, I think schools are becoming much better at thinking about staff well-being and being able to be flexible. And I think that's moving forward. And I look forward to a day where, we can celebrate that we've got it much better, But currently, I think that is one of the challenges with ECTs, because there's so much pressure that they put on themselves alongside the system that actually we need to make sure that we've got mentors. One way I look after them is try to give them that massive dollop of real life and say, you know what, sometimes good is good enough, and that you're going to have to walk away and make sure that you don't be continuing to plan lessons into way into the night, and you have to just stop and make sure that you ask for help, and that you follow, you use your colleagues' wisdom, and and manage those stress levels, because otherwise there is no longevity in this profession, and look for different ways and different avenues. And appreciate that young children, children are children, kids are kids. And sometimes no matter what it is that you do, it just might not be the right day, or they might not have eaten the right food. And it doesn't matter how wonderful your PowerPoint is. And it doesn't matter how many interactive things that you have. They might have had an argument with their girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever prior to it. And something that you've planned might not work. And it's just about having that kind of levity to be able to laugh and brush it off and work with them. And I think sometimes that's difficult for young professionals.
I think it's difficult for
all of us. Yeah.
No, it's so interesting. I mean, you obviously lead a lot of CPD. Some of it's provided to you by the agencies involved in the ECF, and some of it you designed yourself. I mean, when you was in the prisons, was it young adults or like?
I worked in both. So I worked with adults, both in a female and a male prison separately, and then I did work with young offenders. So they were much youngsters, but the approach I took was literacy through a practical approach. So using dramatic application in order and looking at restorative behaviours and communication skills. And I think that was a massive element that was missing from, the kind of their skill set at the time. And I think that led to it. And I think the CPD that I look for to do an internal and external within the school is thinking about how do we fill those professional skill set? How do we scratch the itch? How do we make that bespoke? So I think that's important. Obviously, there is numbers of whole school things that we need to do, and certainly it's about contextual factors. And so therefore, if there's a higher cohort of EAL students or SEND students, then it's about making sure that the teachers have got those adaptive teaching strategies within their toolkit. But equally, it might be certain subject specific. So I think again what we talked about is that teacher voice. So making sure that we and I use different ways of trying to ensure that those teachers' voices are heard, so therefore we can kind of craft it to a bespoke way. And I think it's really important doing with rather than doing to, and also giving them the voice, because offering them to be able to share what they've learned or what they've experienced to others, because like I say, sometimes it's the teacher trainers that have got the ITT, so the trainee teachers that have got the fresher look or a newer take on something and can bring that bring the freshness and bring that new way of looking at something that actually sometimes when we're in our teaching bubble and we've been doing it for years one way, actually it needs some fresh eyes to kind of shake it up and give some new suggestions. So I think that's what I think about. And absolutely, having 23 years teaching, I've been through some awful CPD. But I always just think, how do I get the participants involved? How do I make it meaningful? And what is it that they can take away? Because if it's not useful, then that's difficult. And I think for me, one of the frustrations of the training recently, obviously in the light of COVID, is this a definite reliance on Teams and kind of digital platforms to utilize it. And I think whilst there's lots of work that's going on to make that interactive, I think there's a certain element that's lost when you don't have the kind of, you know, the buzz of meeting other colleagues, and you don't have that instantaneous interaction with other people, and it's those things that make it more memorable. When it's kind of, again, there's that screen, that it is a barrier. It's a barrier to how personal it is. And so I think not only what we're training teachers, but the way we're teaching training.
So you're not a fan of the online sessions? Not
as an entirely sole model, no. I think it has its place. It definitely has to have its place. But I think if we look to if I know there's an investigation that's happening, I heard on the news this morning, that's going to be a 3 years investigation about how ready we were for the pandemic and the effects that it's had and the effect on education. And just on Saturday, you know, it's going to take us 10 years to close the gap of, you know, of some of the students that were struggling prior to the epidemic, you know, right. So and I think now, if we look at our online learning platform and some of the things that we all struggled with in terms of cameras, in terms of you know, students struggling to interact and looking at doing other things, looking at phones, etc. Us as teachers fall foul of those very same things when we become the learners with the ability to turn our camera off or to turn our microphone off, and suddenly there's something else that we need to be doing. I think every teacher, absolutely everybody, is time poor. So if you could be trying to multitask at the same time, then absolutely everybody will, albeit a text message or even doing some marking at the same time. So I think when we look at models for CPD, I think when you're in the moment, when you're meeting people, I think you're much more present rather than just being digitally present. And I think when we're looking at, faced with the lack of time and looking to be what has the most impact, and impact is a really important word in education, then we need to think about that as well for our teacher trainers.
I want to pull that thread, actually, the impact thread, because one of the things I think is that all teachers would really benefit from a good grounding in research skills in order to be able to evaluate their practice in a bit more of a robust way, okay? And so to be able to not only say, you know, rather than your reflection being, well, that didn't work, I won't do that again, but actually try and go, okay, well, what went wrong? What was it that I did or didn't do, that in my planning, in my preparation, my delivery, whatever, that made the wheels come off or didn't quite go how I expected? And I think, you know, to be able to be really, really good at being a reflective practitioner, I think you do need some structure and time, but some structure and skill in terms of how you evaluate how well things have gone. And, you know, Dylan William talks, and I think he's had a new book out, I don't know if it's out already or not, but he talks about, you know, there's lots of things that teachers of all experiences do really well and which work fine for them. But could it be that there are new things or other things which, you know, may or may not be new, which would get a good result and a good impact, but more than the other one? And it could be that we have to be prepared to say goodbye to some of our really cherished practices that we like, because it turns out you can do something different and engage more of your learners or get more bang for your buck, if you like. So in terms of the ability of teachers at any level of their career, what would you say in terms of what we could improve in how we evaluate our CPD offer and encourage teachers to do that sort of as part of their professionalism, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we need to go with the research that's out there and make sure that our research is up to date, but also ensure that we are evaluating when we try to put those things in practice. And I know the EEF uses a fantastic tool in terms of evaluating its research and thinking how much time and effort and impact that it has. And certainly the EEF is something that what I've referred to when it comes to my ECTs. And there's different theories that within the teacher training framework we refer to our teachers in terms of looking and applying certain models rather than just going, oh, did that work, didn't that work, etc. But I think part of the process that we forget to do is really listen and reflect on the voice of and following it up, so the voice of the pupils themselves, so ensuring that them as a stakeholder are taking part of this, but again, rather than just assuming that they've learned, looking at where the learning has taken place and if it's been effective in the way that we want. So try to identify the learner's voice in this and look for evidence. And I also think about them revisiting in a range of contexts. So thinking about how to try it again in a different way. And so not just in a gimmicky way, try something and then go or move it on. And I think Dylan William talks a lot about avoiding the gimmick and trying to make sure that what you're doing has real impact to the learners.
Yeah, no, it's really brilliant. I was just wondering, we've got a couple of people listening in. I don't know if anybody wants to call in and has any thoughts on what we've been discussing. We're talking, of course, about early career framework, early career teachers. So if you are interested in joining in the conversation, please do just call through to on the Podbean app, or pop a message in the chat. It would be great to hear from you if you want to call in. This is the bit when you think, right, I'm going to leave my waiting time, and it's like being in school.
Yeah.
Since we've got a few people on the line there, I wonder if anybody does want to call in. Please do feel free at any time. But Zoe, I just want to sort of say it's so fascinating talking to you, and thank you so much for coming in. We've got about 15 minutes left. So I'd really like to hear a bit more about your experience of CPD. What would you say has been the most inspirational CPD that you have ever engaged in?
I think some of the new things that are happening, the MPQs, and I think in terms of inspirational and useful and kind of unpicking what that means, but recently having completed the MPQ SL, I think that the journey that I found in that, with the combination of learning new material, looking at a range of material and being able to have the autonomy and choice as myself as a professional in which areas I adopted. So as a leader, there's lots of different elements that you could adopt, but thinking about how do I sculpt and mold myself given the research that's out there, the things that do work and the practice, but how can I then make that embedded within, but also sit alongside my beliefs and the things that I have. I think the MPQSL was absolutely fantastic. And in terms of ongoing CPD, to have the pleasure of being able to facilitate the MPQs, recently, and there's now 6 out there. I think from another point of view, as a facilitator, I've thoroughly enjoyed that continued professional development, to be able to take it from the other side. So not only have, participating in the CPD myself and taking the learning through, but helping to facilitate others. So I think for me, it's really important to see that inspiration and to reassure those teachers and say, yes, I hear you. I know it's hard. I know this is frustrating, but have you thought about that, or talk about that, or why don't you do something about that? And this is what they do in other schools, and kind of being able to lead and facilitate them into new learning as light learners in our classroom, but being able to do that with fellow professionals, for me, has been an inspiration.
Fantastic. I can see we've got someone calling in. I don't know if you can do that again, because it didn't quite work. I wasn't quite quick enough. No, I've really enjoyed facilitating on those courses as well, and I think you definitely do. You are learning, and I think one of the things I would say is that sometimes people do feel like, how is it going to be translated back into their school? Kevin, I can see that you're saying you're calling, but I can't see your call coming in. I don't know if you want to just try again. Be great to hear from you. Here we go, invite you in. Hello. Who have we got here? Hi. There. How are you?
Thanks. How are you?
We're good. What would you like to contribute about ECTs and teachers training?
Okay. Where you come?
Okay, I think we're gonna leave that one there. Okay. Okay, never mind. So we're just gonna have the last sort of 10 minutes then. Okay, see if he's definitely gone. No, not sure what's going on there, but let's make sure we're disconnected.
Yeah.
Right.
I think this is a prime example of sometimes when technical difficulties happen in the classroom.
Keep on, carry on. Okay, brilliant.
I think that's something that teacher trainers need to have a whole IT development and training of the practicalities, and not just the lessons and the content, but sometimes, again, moving schools recently where they've got a whole different IT system, and the practicality of being able to juggle all of those things whilst talking, whilst keeping students engaged, whilst teaching the content, sometimes can be a struggle in itself.
Multitasking. So what I was sort of saying about the NPQs is that I kind of feel sometimes like there's some people go through those courses really inspired, and then they go back to work, and it's not always like, especially the specialist ones, the leading teacher development, the behaviour and culture, and the leading teaching. There are definitely people who, and I think it's an improvement, you no longer have to do a project.
I do agree.
Because that's really difficult to manage, and I completely understand why you can't just give everyone who wants one some kind of whole school project, because it's not practical and it's not, on message necessarily. But certainly there are people who want to do they want to do something with it that's practical, and they kind of don't always necessarily have the position within the school to do it. So I guess my point is it's a bit of a balancing act, isn't it? With giving people this access to this whole new world of research and practical tips and things like that. They then maybe feel frustrated in their ability to do.
I think it's an important part of communication, because I think we need to grow our teachers and grow our professionals, and that's right from the grassroots level of early career framework teachers up the way through to middle leaders, and then through into senior leadership. And I think the problem is about empowering. How do we empower and give over some responsibility without the title necessarily, without the money, but with the will and the
coherence,
absolutely, within that.
Otherwise it just all goes very nebulous, and it's very difficult to kind of have a coherent message.
Yeah.
I can see that Paul is wanting to call in. We've got about 2 or 3 more minutes before we have to go to our final messages. Paul, if you do want to make a very quick comment, you're welcome to call in. Hello. There we go.
Hi there, Paul. Can you hear me?
Hi, you okay?
Hi, Paul. How are you?
I'm not too bad. Not too bad. Thanks for the show.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I think you called in a couple of weeks ago, did you, Paul?
I think I might have done. I think I told you about my job role changing and things like that.
Yeah. Well, I wonder what your views on what we've been talking about tonight, the ECTs and things like that.
Well, yeah, I've mentored a few in the past because I've been going, 15, 16 years now. I think there's been a shift between how, well, in my experience, teachers, how they used to feel about ECTs back then and how they feel about them now. I came across quite a lot of dated views when I first started in my first sort of 5 years from some other teachers who had been teaching for a very long time, and they didn't see NQTs back then as they wouldn't budge on their sort of preferred ways and preferred systems, like you were saying before, and they were less likely to take on the ideas of NQTs back then. But I do think people are more open now to taking ideas from ECTs and people who've gone on recent CPD. So I think it has definitely changed. I've worked with a few ECTs in the last 2 or 3 years, actually, who've been very good. And I've got one who's working with us who finishes her second year of ECT this year, and she's going to be a year 5-6 teacher next year. So I think it's good when you find a good one, and they can update everyone else a little bit as well.
Sorry,
absolutely. I think you're right, and I think you've made a really valid point there. Is when they're sharing the CPD, because obviously that's important in terms of schools and how schools manage their staff, and regardless of how long they've been teaching. But when a meaningful CPD has happened, to be able to disseminate that out to the workforce and therefore share that good practice, I think you're absolutely right. It's really vital, and therefore people feel empowered because they're able to engage in that professional conversation. And I think you're right. I remember before, people rolling their eyes thinking, oh, I've got an NQT working with me and they're not doing it this way. And I remember first I was an NQT a long time ago and had the pleasure of working alongside some fabulous English teachers, but also some English teachers that had been doing the same thing with the same text for a very long time. Yeah. And I do remember that feeling of frustration, thinking when I suggested to do it from a more dramatic point of view, and that sort of saying, no, just do it this way, just do it this way. And I do still remember that, actually. Yeah. So I think you're absolutely right in terms of celebrating different ways, different styles, new, fresh ideas. And I think that shift has definitely taken place for the better.
No, I agree.
I think I was going to say, I think that when they are working with you, when you're mentoring them as well, if you give them enough space, they're willing to try those ideas that they've seen. Like I would never have, I tell you what, I would never have done a lesson on Quidditch if I hadn't seen my student come through and take an after school club for Quidditch, and he's gone on to do a decent job. And glad to say that most of the ones I sort of worked with have enjoyed it and then moved on and done quite well in the future. So that's good.
I mean, that's brilliant. And you make a very valid point. And when we've got our learners in the classroom, we're encouraging them to take risks. We're encouraging them to try new things. and therefore we're there going to support them if they don't quite work out. And so we need to be doing that with our young professionals as well. We need to be able to know that it's not the end of the world. They're not going to get sacked if something doesn't go quite well enough. And so therefore it's about supporting them when they fall and celebrating when they fly, and therefore being able to have that learning experience and really good mentors like yourself is something that's invaluable to the teacher training process. Absolutely. And certainly it sounds like you've got a really great rapport with your ECTs, but like I said before, developing that mentor, but then taking that into a coaching way and developing that coaching ideology, certainly with ECT2s, I think is really important. And I think what it does is sow the seed for them to then become really good mentors themselves as they develop later in their career.
Yeah, well, I think what's useful about our place is that we've got a head teacher who will carry that on after she's got her ECT, because in the past I've looked after students who've done the qualification and then they go and you don't kind of see them again. So whatever head teacher they go to work for needs to still nurture that rawness and sometimes naivety, because it can actually bring on really good qualities in them as a teacher.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of remember that we're all still learners, and if we kind of visualize ourselves as still being learners, then that sets you up really. If you have for whatever reason kind of closed yourself off, because you think you haven't got enough time, or it's too hard to change, why change now? I think we just need to keep that mindset, don't we?
Yeah, and I think, and one thing at the moment, I'm on a rotation of kind of going in and visiting lessons of my ECTs, and there's one side of me that's kind of looking for key things as the ECT coordinator, but there's other thing is as I'm a teacher, excited that I'm going to see new things. I'm excited that I'm going to experience fresh ideas, and there's always, regardless of whenever I do my lesson visits, that there's something that reminds me, I should do that again, or there's something I take away, or there's something I revisit, or I'm inspired by something that happens.
No, that's really brilliant. Thanks for calling in, Paul. I'm gonna wind the show up now, so I really appreciate your call and I hope to speak to you again sometime soon, so thanks again.
No problem at all. Thank you.
Nice to speak to you. Take care. Right, well, we've kind of come to the end of our time, and I'm just so happy to have had Zoe here. I was going to say in my studio. It's not. It's more like a cupboard, isn't it, Zoe?
It's very nice. Just very warm.
It's very warm. But I really have enjoyed speaking to you about this evening. Thank you very much for speaking, and sort of such wisdom and such enthusiasm as well for your
having
subject. You're very welcome. I'm just going to play us out with a message from our sponsor.
It's time for a fresh start to language learning. Pearson EdXL's new student-centred French, German and Spanish 2024 GCSEs cater to the needs of all learners, regardless of their background, ability or reason for studying. Rooted in learned language knowledge, their assessments are transparent and accessible, allowing all students to showcase their language skills. Through inclusive and relatable content, the new Pearson EdXL MFL GCSEs build a shared cultural capital that helps students develop an understanding of and appreciation for the wider world. Find out more at go.pearson.com/MFL GCSE 24.
This programme has been brought to you by the Happy Confident Company. Our clinically approved, ready-to-go wellbeing and mental health programme will help your pupils thrive. In only 10 minutes a day, you'll be able to deliver social and emotional learning and wellbeing tools throughout your school. To find out more, visit us at www.happyconfident.com.
So this brings us to the end of today's Late Late Show. I've been Kathryn Taylor. Many thanks again to our special guest, Zoe Neagle, and for everyone who joined us this evening live and who is listening on the podcast later on. Remember that our Teachers Talk radio shows all week and on a huge variety of subjects. Just visit the Podbean app or wherever you get your podcasts. Go on Twitter and see all the things that you can tune into and listen back to. Join me again for fortnightly sessions with Late Late Show with Kathryn Taylor. Bye for now.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.